It's my pleasure to call to order this April meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Board. Can I have a motion to call the meeting to order?
I'll make the motion to call the meeting to order.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving to the tennis court section of the agenda, the first item is Sunel LLC.
We didn't have anything further,
Right.
and I was under the impression that it was ready possibly for a vote tonight.
Yes.
John, this is your application, right?
Yes, there were some, I think what you needed was the location of the test hole and some drainage calcs, and those are all put on the plan by Squires and Holden. So I think that was the only thing that's holding it up, but we submitted that some time ago, so hopefully you can vote on it tonight, that would be great.
Anybody have any comments?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, so can we have a motion to approve the application of Sunel LLC?
As amended, the last revision being dated, John?
March 19th.
March 19th.
March
Yes,
19th,
19th.
March 19th, 2014.
All right. I'll make a motion to approve the Sunel LLC tennis court as amended March 19th.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Second is Old Town Associates. We have some
Yeah, we got
modified plans been submitted.
It's the 7th,
we
isn't
got this, we got that,
Yes.
and we got our required 2 feet to ground water, so that was the only thing we were waiting for.
Start off with the right date.
Yeah, we had coordinated with Mr. Lemansky after the last meeting. Minor questions on drainage. We reached out to Steve and also reached out to the applicant's engineer. Had a conversation about it, and the plan was revised, and I believe just resubmitted today. But it does reflect what we discussed, having to do with the tennis court drainage and the leaching pool effective depths and things like that. So we believe that we have no further questions or comments on it.
Right.
The plan passes muster.
And Aldo was good with it.
Yep.
Mhm.
Any further questions? Can I have a motion to approve this Old Town Associates application reflecting the changes to in the modified plan?
Do we know what the last modification date was?
4-3.
4-3. I'll make a motion to approve the Old Town Associates tennis court on the plan dated 4/3/14.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me, members of the board, I'm the applicant. I have a question. There's another resolution, there was a resolution for lot 9. Is that-
We
That
approved
was
that at the
passed
work
at the
session.
last meeting.
Okay, and this resolution, when will we get it, the approval for today, is lot 7, tennis court?
We just did it.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be reduced to writing, and I'll do that for the sake of the record, but we can go down as approving it today.
Mm-hmm.
The building department will know that it's
Okay.
approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ian Judson, 305 North Main Street.
Just tell you at the work session, we discussed that, and the only thing you wanted us to do was to put the actual drainage calculations on the site plan, which we did, we submitted them last week.
That's correct. We had received them separately in a letter from the architect, but we just received a plan dated April 2nd that added those drainage calculations to the plan.
Have you had a chance to check it out?
I did, yes.
All is good?
Looks fine.
Can I see what came in?
And they matched this letter.
Oh, yeah, okay.
that
Yeah.
CMAC had sent for the files, so we added to the plan just so it's all in one place.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's all we were waiting for in this one as well.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the Judson application based
Okay.
on the revisions submitted
April 2nd.
April 2nd?
Yes, it is April 2nd. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the Ian Judson tennis court, 305 North Main Street, according to the plans resubmitted and dated April 2nd, 2014.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that should go into...
Let's go in and find it.
That's 12 hasn't closed. Yeah, we went through that one at the work session. Everything was good with that
So all
at the
we
work
need to do is
session.
vote on it. So 12,
Excuse me, do we have what's the date on those plans? The date, the only date you submitted, I just don't have my file on that one.
I'm not sure, I submitted the Wednesday before the
Okay. So just get the date on that.
March 24th.
I'll make a motion to approve the 12 Pheasant Cloud Associates Tennis Court on the plans that were submitted that dated March 24th, 2014.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You should have voted on that.
Okay, public hearing segment, R. John Punnett, 220 Hampton Road.
This is getting in the way.
The applicant, Chief Flanagan, you may remember at the work session, we talked about this, and there were a few pieces of technical information that the board asked be put on the site plan. That's been done by Nathan Corwin, and we got the drawings today, and they were emailed to Chick's office and also to my office. There were some technical things, including showing where the 50-foot transitional yard is. There was a typographical error in the title, and there was a specific request for the separate tax map numbers to be shown. So that's all been submitted, and I think where we are procedurally is that we would like to close the public hearing. I recognize that we can't do anything tonight other than close the public hearing, so that's all I'd ask you to do. You already did render a secret determination, so that's been taken care of. As you remember, there was no public comment on this. It's the exact same plan we've been looking at in one form or another for several years.
Does anyone on the board have a objection to closing the public hearing?
Just ask if there's one more time, if there's any public comment.
Is there any public comment on the application? Then I think it would be appropriate to close the public hearing.
Thank you
Do we
kindly.
have a motion to do that, Steve?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So now we're going to review the information you provided, Gil, and we'll look at it at the work session. Okay, in subdivision review, OIA Associates. Any further developments, John?
I've actually had a couple of helpful conversations with Rick Petras, and he's asked me for some additional information, which I'm in the process of getting for him. I'm just trying to show him analogous part of the requirements. Probably most importantly, the one on, Bishop's Pond. So I'm in the process of getting that for him, and hopefully the trustees will make a decision on it sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Okay,
Do you want to adjourn to
Please.
the,
May 5th?
what's our,
May 5th.
May 5th is the,
Public
what's the work
meeting.
session?
The
28th?
28th.
We adjourn it to May 5th. That includes the work session.
Okay. I will make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn for all purposes the OIA Associates LLC to the May 5th meeting.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't think so. Bo,
Yes.
these are, the next couple are have already been adjourned at the work session. We can pass by them.
Yes. That would be 550,
And the PEP 2.
two PEP 2s. Yeah.
The two PEP
You
2s.
don't need to read them.
Okay. Cowles Associates, 477 Little Plains Road.
That's, this was the two-lot subdivision off of, it's on the corner of Little Plains and Gin, and you remember there was a zoning board of appeals granted the application in order to create these two lots, each of two acres more or less, in the 3-acre zone because they were of the character of the neighborhood.
John, Little Plains and Gin or Little Plains and Foster?
Little Plains and Gin. It's on the northwest corner of Little Plains and Gin. So it fronts on both Little Plains and Gin. So, and I guess there would be, I think there was a public hearing for the zoning board of appeals, so, and there's even a question as to whether or not, Kathy and I were speaking, and everyone at the board was speaking at the last meeting, whether or not there's any zoning board of, any health department subdivision approval required, because it's a house on one lot, and the other lot shows as a lot on the 1981 tax map. So, there's probably no, what we would probably, if the board is to approve it, we would probably just ask the board to sign it approved, obviously when the process gets done, and then just file it as a miscellaneous map, because I don't believe that it would need health department approval for the subdivision. So I guess if the board could review the EAF and I think schedule a public hearing for the subdivision itself, probably just, and we're not going to have to, I don't think we're going to have to worry about health department, so really what we would need is a public hearing, which, again, we've already had one for the zoning board, but of course we need one for the subdivision process, because we're in effect re-subdividing the property.
And you said on the 1981 map, it shows as two separate lots? Under, but it would show as two separate lots, but it was the same ownership and joint ownership?
Yeah, that's what happened. They were never put into, when they were purchased, it was either 1 acre or 2 acre zone, forgive me, it might have been R80. They were conforming when they were purchased, but then no one ever checkerboarded them. So, they're two separate tax bills. I think the current applicant, has owned them since the 70s. They were separate lots. So that would be an exemption from Article 6, I believe. So we're not gonna, again, we're really here to, as per the direction of the Zoning Board of Appeals when they granted the relief, to have this board consider the re-subdivision of the lots. So I think you need a public hearing for that, but, and an EAF review.
Yeah, we had no further comments, in agreement with what Mr. Bennett has represented, and we were expecting you would consider it for scheduling the public hearing tonight.
So we don't need to vote on that, it's scheduled for the next,
May 5th?
the May 5th meeting. Correct.
Right, but we don't have to vote on that, we just are gonna schedule it, or we have to vote on
A
that?
resolution to schedule a
Okay.
public hearing for May 5th.
Make a motion to have a resolution to schedule the Cowles Associates, 477 Little Plains Road, for a public hearing on May 5th, 2014.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next one, so I'll just stay here.
Harkonnen LLC and Atreides LLC, 408 First Neck Lane.
Yeah, the board had a public hearing and closed the public hearing. And forgive me, I should know this. I don't know, I think Kathy was gonna prepare a neg deck. I think she did prepare a neg deck. So we'll get that, we got that to the health department. We're in the health department process now, which will take a little bit of time. The health department requires, when you have a subdivision where one of the lots is already improved, and this lot has,
Approval on this with Kathy?
there are
Just
two
need a
lots,
little
one in
more
the
time,
front,
right?
3 acres will be vacant, but there's on the Agawam lot, which is almost 6 acres, or maybe it's 5 point something, there's a house, a guest house, a pool, a house, and they all have septic system, or wastewater systems. And as part of this subdivision process, before you can move forward, the health department makes you, in effect, retrofit all of the existing wastewater systems to conform to the existing code. So we're in the process of figuring out how they want us to do that. So that'll be a while. So really, I don't think there's anything to be done until we come back and with the health department approval.
So do you want to adjourn it for,
I'll just keep carrying it, if that's okay. We'll adjourn it for a month. Hope springs eternal.
Not like it's a special trip.
You're gonna be here anyway.
I'll,
Well, we moved it along. Actually, Norsec was out and sized everything, and Bob Smith is and Fred Arms. Armis, the engineer that they use.
Fred Armis.
Yeah, they're revising the design to show new wastewater design.
Mhm.
So that's where we are right now.
Okay.
Well,
Oh.
just each lot would have its own separate design, right?
Each lot would have its own separate, wastewater
Facilities, yeah.
system, but they're making, as they do now, when you go in for a subdivision design, for a subdivision of the property, they make you, in effect, retrofit all of the existing wastewater design.
By the nature of the subdivision application itself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm not so sure where they get the power to do that, but they do it, and it takes too long to fight it. So they actually make you physically do the work before they'll move the process along, which is interesting. But that's where we are now.
I'll make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn the Harkinen LLC and the Treaties LLC to the May 5th, 2014 meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Damon Mezzacappa, 430 and 420 Halsey Neck Lane, and 139 Cooper's Neck Lane. This was presented at the work session.
Here, I think we're waiting for a deed to be submitted, and also waiting for an environmental assessment form, because it's type 1 action. So,
And is there anybody here as the, representing the applicant? No.
So we're still waiting for the full EAF,
yes,
right?
has not been submitted and received.
Okay. So I'll make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn the Damon Mezzacappa 430 and 420 Halsey Neck Lane and 139 Cooper's Neck Lane to the May 5th, 2014 meeting.
I'll second that.
Based upon the fact that no one is present here tonight to represent the applicant.
Okay. And based upon the fact that there's no one here to represent the applicant.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
South Lane Properties, 104 Gin Lane.
This we discussed a little bit at the work session. You may remember this was a proposed subdivision that we came before you informally for a number of months ago. And one of the things I was asked to do after the work session was to submit a formal application to subdivide, which I did. And normally I put these in at final, but it's fine to give them at the preliminary stage or at the sketch plan stage. So I guess what I'm hoping to do is at some point we can schedule a public hearing on this one too,
For the next meeting?
for the next meeting.
We have no other questions or comments at this point.
Okay, that would be appropriate. Want to make that motion, Steve?
Sure. I will make a motion to schedule a public hearing for the South Lane Properties LLC 104 Gin Lane on, for the March 5th, 2014 meeting.
May 5th.
I'm sorry, May 5th.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unless you meant 2015.
Hey, please, no.
No, I meant May 5th, 2014.
The Mitchell Family Real Estate Limited Partnership, 180 Great Plains Road.
Right, this one, you may remember, we mentioned at the work session, apparently it slipped off the agenda inadvertently, and luckily it's back on. I think it's, at this point, the public hearing was closed. I think you rendered a secret determination, and what we're looking for now is a resolution dealing with sketch plan approval. So if that can happen at the next meeting, I'd be eternally grateful.
What,
Have you got the file, Pam?
Here it is. Look at, yeah, it is here.
Is that where we were at on it? I mean,
We
Close the public
we
hearing.
closed the public hearing
Okay.
on it.
March.
We adopted a neg deck,
Right.
so we
I
just,
think we thought we'd coordinate with Bo at some point to prepare the decision.
yeah,
Because it's a sketch plan only, we still have to come back to you, but at least we can get move forward.
is this an opportunity to go right to final, or?
be fine with me.
You're still in Health Department, right?
You know, you may remember that this subdivision was reviewed by you maybe 8 or 9 years ago. The Health Department did approve it at that point, although this one is, remember, it's a little bit different, the lot lines are, so we'll probably have to go back to the Health Department. I guess we'll have to do that. I'll certainly explore that with them, but if we could move it more directly, I'd be happy to do that.
Is this, the buildings, are we looking, the applicant looking forward to another use of the buildings? This has multiple buildings on it?
Right, I think we'd
Do
do
they
the
want,
same.
do they want a covenant, that this standard covenant, that they'll use it as one
Yes,
entity?
yeah, until there's a separation of beneficial interest, yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I don't see how anything is gonna change as far as the sketch, between the sketch and the final.
Really won't.
So, no problem in going right to a final, waiving, invoking the power of the board to waive the sketch and go right to the final. It's a two-lot subdivision. Most of the conforming, the applicant was cooperative in reconfiguring the lines to make a more conventional subdivision out of it.
It would be great, since we had a public hearing, I think that would be great, if we could do that, that would be fantastic.
So if you're so inclined, then a resolution to waive the sketch plan approval and proceed directly to final lot submission and schedule a public hearing for May 5.
Can you paraphrase that?
You can use
Okay.
that language. Did you get it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Question, do we need to do that, since we had a public hearing already on the sketch plan? Do you think we need to do that?
I think it's just a good idea, Gil, just
Okay.
to make sure that,
Okay.
nobody challenges the
Okay.
issue.
Okay.
Basically, we're waiving the provision.
And you're right.
Okay.
So Antoinette has it, you just can call for a vote,
Okay, I'll
move.
move for the vote per Bo's.
What he said.
What he said.
A resolution to waive sketch plan approval and proceed to the final, and schedule a public hearing for May 5th, 2014.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
The Site plan review section, the Chabad, Southampton.
Jeff, is there anything going on with the bonding?
As far as I know, we've submitted all the paperwork that needs to be submitted.
Yeah, but have the trustees approved the bond?
Yes, they had to approve the bond first, before it went to the building department. And the building department got the
Right.
bond and issued a building permit.
I don't know why then it's still appearing on the,
I don't
I'll
know
check
either.
with the
I think
building.
that was the
department.
outstanding question
Yeah,
about the bond, but
Yeah.
maybe that's news to this
Well, I
board.
think we had a discussion about the bond, and it got approved and then got sent off to the building.
right, so I'll double check that, but if that's the case, then the building department should have been aware of it.
Okay.
I'll double check. So adjourn that then for all purposes to the May 5 meeting.
Make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn for all purposes the Chabad of Southampton to the May 5th meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Elizabeth John K. 483 Hill Street.
At the last meeting, there were a couple of questions. One of the questions dealt with the, this is a flag lot, and in the front lot, the Hill Street lot has to use as part of this board's approval, the Hill Street lot has to use the flag pole in order to gain access. And there was, originally that flagpole access went, for the Hill Street lot, went all the way up the flagpole, but I think.
Excuse me, this is Janky?
Yes,
483 Hill?
43 Hill.
43 Hill?
It's Farrell also.
Oh, okay, because I got, the cover letter is from,
From Gilbert, yeah, because
Gil.
Gilbert is representing the seller.
okay.
Yeah, but, that's true, but I'm representing the applicant, Gilbert's
Okay.
representing the seller, but there's some questions about the extent of the driveway.
Okay.
Gilbert, if you wanted to- yeah, it's probably, you wrote the letter, it's probably easy for you to.
There's no problem with this, by the way, just that I think there was a need to clarify, because the planning board actually looked at this access twice.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, there was an access that went back only 60 feet, and then the plan
Right.
came back and went all the way to the back.
Right.
And just so you know, in terms of our transaction with Mr. Farrell, if the depth of that strip is to be reduced, driveway is to be reduced by 50 feet, we're fine with that. It doesn't have to go all the way to the back.
Yeah, and it doesn't affect the access for the
No.
front lot along
Okay.
the flagpole at all.
I wasn't stepping on John's toes, I just wanted you
No,
guys
no,
to
I'm
have all the
glad-
information
no, I'm
that you
glad
know.
you-
Sure.
I don't take it that way at all.
No.
I don't think anybody
You better
has.
not.
Or he will step on your toe.
That's what the steel toe.
Yeah, from what I remember, we only had two issues. One was that, the driveway, and the other was that the trees, the existing trees on the plan that were,
Let me talk to you about that, if I
Okay.
may. This is, because I want to clarify that, there was a plan that showed trees, and this might have been without thought, there was a plan that showed trees in the mid, this is a 20-foot wide strip, but as you're aware, the original subdivision approval required that only the westerly 10 feet of the property be used, of the flagpole be used for access.
the easterly or the westerly?
Westerly. So there was a plan that showed a hedge going through the middle of this. And I thought it made more sense to have the hedge on the easterly side of the flagpole. Keep to the restriction that the actual physical access and driveway be on the westerly part. But given the fact that I know this town law, emergency vehicle access is 15 feet, I would think that you would want hedging on the easterly side of the flagpole, a limitation on the actual travel for pedestrian, for single-family residential use on the westerly side, as the planning board has already said. But I would think you'd want this, even though the easterly portion wouldn't be paved, I would think you'd want that open for emergency vehicle access. That's up to the board. I don't think it makes sense to put a 10-foot wide, I don't think it makes sense to put a hedging in the middle of this access point, because you
You need the space.
Mm-hmm.
even though, again, I'm being repetitious, but even though the travel portion of it for day-to-day use is restricted to the 10 westerly feet, I think you want unobstructed access for emergency vehicles in there. So that I would think that the hedge would go on the easterly side. But that's up to you guys.
The aerial shows that existing driveway that sort of ends.
Yep.
And in line with that, there's some access would come directly in
That's exactly
from
right.
here.
Yeah.
And there is room to the east, there's actually some existing vegetation to
Yep.
the east.
Mhm.
So that
Makes sense.
seems logical.
So we'll show that on the planting plan. Yeah, we're still pending before the ARP.
But then I think the only other comment was that the existing trees that were shown on
This plan.
the developed plan
Right.
were to be renoted to be existing trees to remain.
Oh, okay, we can do that. I think that's what was meant, but clear up the ambiguity.
Right,
Exactly.
but I think you also may want to revisit them, and because if you've got a tree that's dying or scraggly, then pull that off of the one that's being submitted, so we don't have to get into a whole thing about pulling down something that should be pulled down anyway, because
Well,
we're saying it's to remain.
My guess is that the ones that are shown.
They're pretty big.
The 24-inch linden, 36-inch linden, they're good size.
Mhm.
I think they're okay, but we'll go back and make sure of that.
So I think that's what we had.
John, was there any documentation in the research that provided a reason for why the right-of-way went all the way to the north side of the interior lot?
Not that I'm aware of. You might be more aware of that. I'm not aware. I think the only real issue was that the neighbors back in the, I guess, was it in the 80s or the 90s? When the,
Early 90s. I wasn't
Yeah.
involved with that at the time. Somebody
yeah, it
else
would
did.
appear that the neighbor to the east didn't want the access all the way to the easterly portion, but it didn't occur, it doesn't make sense to me why you would have the easement go all the way to the
There was no covenant or anything as to
No, the covenant just talks about where
burden
the,
the servient parcel as to use.
no, the covenant just talks about the location on an east-west basis of where the access would be.
From what I got, the original question was that the people that own the front lot, who are also my clients, weren't sure exactly where a garage might go. And that was, and now when they've looked at this, in fact, we have an agreement with Mr. Farrell that if he wants to reduce the length of that by 50 feet, we'll agree to it. And that would enable,
Does 50 feet take it to the property line?
well, it takes it 50 feet back behind
Back
the
from
property.
the property
Yeah,
line.
the property line is here, so this would move it 50 feet away from the property line. That's as far back as they would put a garage. And that's a contractual arrangement we have.
There's really no need for, there's really no need
There's
for
no
it
need to go all the way up.
all the way up.
Yeah, so,
The less pavement, the better, actually.
yeah.
I didn't see any planning reason why it was extended this left.
So the north parcel then has, a partial easement on
The
it?
north parcel
Yeah.
has
The whole thing.
The whole thing, with the fee title, 20 feet, fee title. All the way
The
up.
the front parcel is the one getting the easement, because the driveway, originally this lot, the approved lot had its own driveway, we had to abandon that.
I see.
So the easement for the front lot is limited.
Okay, all right,
That's-
very good.
And that's the 60 feet.
That's,
Yes,
well,
well,
50.
no, it's
50?
actually, it would come up to within 50 feet of this line.
All right.
but it doesn't at all impede the access or the planning plan to have access taken for both lots over the flagpole. I mean, I think that's what you would be concerned about,
Mhm.
and this does it handily.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So would you like to have us make a motion to adjourn to next month?
I'll have them change, make those changes.
I will make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn for all purposes the Elizabeth Janke, 43 Hill Street, to the May 5th meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Okay?
Aye.
Moses Bishop LLC, 132 McGee Street.
I think, as you'd note, this matter is not being reviewed by my office, but Mr. Cleary is here to advise the board on the status. Right, so as we talked about at the work session, as you know, this is essentially an extension of the ponds, a connection through the ponds project to create 11 new dwelling units on the property that used to be a construction yard to the south. The project is in an R20 zone, and it requires a number of variances, both area variances as well as a use variance from the zoning board of appeals. At the prior meeting, we initiated the seeker review under the direction of your board, designating lead agency, and those notices were distributed to the involved agencies. Because this requires this action of the zoning board, we do have to complete the seeker review before the zoning board acts on it. There were a series of relatively minor comments that the applicant had addressed at the work session. You saw the landscaping plan was delivered and so forth. The landscaping plan is quite well done, and it provides the perimeter buffer around the edge of the property. There's not a lot of extra space to do a heck of a lot of additional landscaping, so that landscaping plan is adequate. The primary issue that was that we uncovered in our site visit prior to the work session was the fill that was required to be brought into that property. A good deal of that has already been imported. So the building inspector was aware of that activity, stopped that activity, but nevertheless, a good deal of that fill has been brought into the property without the supervision of the village. So there has to be some work to determine if that fill was imported properly and so forth. And the building inspector now will have to take a look at that. But it appears as though it was done in conformance with the plan that you have in front of you. So again, that's a matter of confirming what was done on the property and making sure that was done in accordance with the plans that we have before us. So the question becomes now whether or not and when we move to the public hearing stage of the project. But again, most of the primary issues have been addressed already. And there are a few relatively minor comments. For example, there's a lighting plan, and it indicates the lighting proposed for the lighting fixtures around the roadway in the center of the property. It was not clear if there were building-mounted lights behind the buildings that might affect neighboring properties. So that's a minor detail that has to be added to the plans. But again, that's a relatively minor detail. So the question really becomes if and when you wish to schedule the public hearing on this application.
Did,
Is there a representative for the applicant here this evening?
We'd like you to schedule a public hearing for May 5th. I think we've got all the issues out. The fill that Mr. Cleary's talking about came from the ponds, and it was moved over as we were doing construction. We just moved some of the fill over from there. So it's from an approved project that you guys did.
I would just encourage the applicant not to proceed any further, because it kind of makes us crotchety when that's going on.
We don't want crotch.
right, because moving the fill is one thing, but when they're
Yeah.
placing it, if it's gonna remain, it's gotta be compacted in 2-foot lifts or whatever. So it doesn't just have to be picked up and moved over, it's actually gotta be installed properly.
Yeah, they did that at the current site. They're aware of it.
It's my understanding the building inspector did catch it as it was going on, so I think he has a good understanding of what was happening, it just wasn't done.
Did we get a profile, at the work session, we talked about the sewage treatment plant and it's being sized for taking the additional?
It is, so the documentation that was submitted by the applicant confirms that that's the case. I don't know that Aldo has verified that information.
Okay, and also, it's gonna be gravity fed from that?
Yes, it is.
area?
Down from the ponds up to the plant.
Did we get a profile?
Not yet.
Because I didn't see that at the meeting
get
either. Okay. And then, were we going to get a new parking plan, or was that one that we showed at the work session, the parking plan with the turn, with the?
Right, so that's a request we've made to the applicant. We haven't, that little bulb around that area has not yet been submitted yet.
Okay.
But that wouldn't affect parking count, it's really a driveway orientation improvement.
Right.
To that sort of intersection as you come into the property.
Right.
Are there any approvals or zoning approvals that it will be necessary to get before we schedule the public hearing?
Well,
Would it be premature to schedule the public hearing in advance of getting those approvals?
Here's the complication with this particular project. So the connection through to the ponds requires an amendment to the site plan for the ponds as well. So that has to be amended. We have the site plan for the enclave, this particular project. And again, I think it's 5 variances that would be required. Basically, the R20 single-family zoning requirements apply to this property. We're not building a single-family home. So most of the zoning requirements are violated by this sort of clustered subdivision, or site plan rather. So it's a little bit of an unusual situation. Does the variance, obviously, we need to finish the seeker review before the zoning board can act on the variances. So in terms of timing, I think you need to go through the seeker process before the zoning board acts. But in terms of amending the site plan for the ponds, that can be done simultaneously, it can be done after the fact. I don't think that matters, the ponds is basically done. It's really retroactively amending that piece of that property where the roadway comes through. But health department or anything of that sort, I don't think they need to be done now. I think that can be done during the course of the review as you typically would do.
Okay.
Counsel, what's your opinion?
I think May 5th is a little premature. I think that Kathy ought to review this and put this in order. If we're talking, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I know the applicant wants to move forward.
Well,
but-
Kathy's off this one. This is,
Right there. So,
Yeah, there's some.
we don't have secret completed yet.
No. So
So if you could have June 5th, it can't be that much of a delay.
Is it normally the process of the board to have secret done before the public hearing?
Well, we like as much done as possible before we schedule any of the
That's
hearings.
fine. I have no objection to that. I guess it's a matter of preference on the board's part.
Anything to add, ladies?
I think it's too early.
Okay.
Don't want to go on
So,
forever.
Mr. Lamar's opinion of the board, we need to get a few more ducks in a row, or you do, before we open this for public hearing.
I would just say, we're talking about the secret process. We went through a long secret process on the property next door, and in the middle of that, there was a type 1. They did a negative declaration, because of the improvement that we're bringing to the property. And I think the same holds true in this regard, that what we're proposing to put on the property is such an improvement over what existed, and we're cleaning it up, that the secret process shouldn't complicate this application as it seems to be doing. It's just gonna, it's just a month of holding us up. We've been to the zoning board, we've done our presentation, we expect a favorable result pending the outcome of SECRA. To me, the SECRA in this particular instance shouldn't be too complicated based on the improvement on the property. So we'd like to get moving forward on it if we could, respectfully.
Board of Appeals closed the public hearing?
They left it open to get the SECRA from this board. They asked you to be lead agency.
I didn't do it any sooner.
Didn't change your opinion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would totally agree that the proposed improvements are without a doubt an improvement over the prior operation of that facility. There's no question. I think to council's point, though, there are some details that are just loose ends. And if it's your board's practice to tie up loose ends before you move forward, we should do that.
I think it's the opinion of the board that we should not make an assumption because the first application on the ponds was approved that this one's just going to go right through. I think it probably will, but it's not our place to make that assumption. So I think we're the tenor of the board to wait until June to make sure you have accomplished the approvals that you need to get.
To facilitate matters, Mr. Chairman, I'll put a summary memo together dealing with these minor issues so the applicant can very clearly address them prior to the next meeting.
So can we get a resolution to that effect? Unless
Just adjourn for all purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just adjourn it for all
Right.
purposes.
Right. I'll make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn for all purposes the Moses Bishop LLC to the May 5th, 2014.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Pelosi Ioto Enroller, 50 County Road 39. This item was voted, it was closed, the public hearing was closed at the previous meeting, but due to a request by the applicant, we have agreed to,
I didn't make that request.
no, a request by the public, concerned public, to add some additional information to the record. We have reopened the public hearing for the purpose of just allowing this information to be included. Mr. Bregman.
Do we have to make a motion to reopen?
You do. Let me clarify something for the board and counsel for the applicant. At the last previous meeting, I met Mr. Bragman on street before the hearing, and he inquired of me if anything was substantially going on with the application, and I said I didn't think so. Based upon that, he felt it wasn't necessary to appear, although he wanted to make a submission which had been granted to the applicant. As it turns out, the board closed the hearing, and Mr. Bragman still wishes to make a submission, so it's my recommendation that in all fairness about this, that he be allowed to do so and allow the applicant time to reply to that. And that's the reason that I suggested the proper procedure for that would be for Mr. Bragman to explain that and make that request. So it's with my support that the request is made, and then we work out a schedule that he can make the submission, and if you're so inclined, and that the applicant's attorney has an opportunity to reply to that.
Excuse me, are you prepared to make this submission now?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion to reopen the public hearing of Pelosi Ioto Enroller for the purpose of Mr. Bragman entering a submission into the record and to allow time for Mr. Gilmartin to reply.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Marie, how much time do you think you'd like? Do you want to,
I don't know, he just handed it to me,
Yeah.
which is.
what, do you want a month?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can I speak to the board? Is the record open now? Okay, I want to make that clear. Am I correct that we still haven't resolved the secret issue, the type 2 versus unlisted? That's still an open issue?
I believe it is.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure I had that correct. Jeff Bragman, 15 Railroad Avenue, East Hampton. I appreciate the board reopening this. It was a misunderstanding that we had, and I have to say that when I ran into counsel at another CBA hearing and he mentioned what had happened, he immediately said, I'll consent to let you put information in, provided I have enough time, and I appreciate his courtesy. He said subject to getting the okay from his client, but he was very forthcoming about consenting to it, and I do appreciate that. It was very collegial of him. I would suggest that it's probably appropriate to keep the record open. The board can make its own decision, of course, because in the event that you decide that the case is an unlisted action, there's going to be another submission. You're going to have to do an EAF Part 2, so there'll be some paperwork that has to be done anyway, which we might want to comment on, the applicant might want to comment on. In the event that a decision is made that this is an unlisted action, it doesn't mean that there are no issues that the board has to look at. I know the board understands that when you get a site plan application, it's always a use that is a conforming use. Every use that comes into you is a conforming use. But site plan review has its own local requirements for design and that protect the public health and safety. And the two that strike me as being particularly relevant here are that traffic access be sufficient, safe, and adequate. So what site plan does is it says, well, even if you have a conforming use, your board has the power and I think the obligation to look to make sure that that use fits on the land and that there is adequate provision on the property to take care of circulation, traffic, and parking. And it's circulation and parking and trip generation that I think are of concern on this property. A laundromat with 48 washing machines is a high-traffic use. I brought an engineer with me today to just talk to you, not at great length, but to talk about what you can anticipate that number of washing machines producing in terms of increased daily trips to this site. And I think it's important also to keep in mind that the use, because it has wastewater treatment going on that requires emptying large tanks that hold the wastewater from the washing machines, that it's going to involve the frequent use of fairly large trucks coming in and out of the site because they have to empty these tanks, they have to turn, get on, they got to back up and get out. So those are additional concerns that I think need to be addressed by the applicant to the board to show that on this rather constrained site, he can accommodate the traffic that we think he's going to generate. Now, under village law, this use is not defined under village law. This is one of the things we discussed in the lawsuit. And the court, actually what the village did is it referred to the town law, it referred to Southampton town law and said, well, under Southampton town law, a laundromat is a personal service shop, so we think it should also be a personal service shop here. And I think it's consistent with that position to look to town law for what the parking requirements are here, because there is no specific parking requirement under village law. And under town law, which the village has already used in this case once, the town standard for parking is 1 parking space for every washing machine. So that would mean 48 spaces, which is quite a bit more than what's available on this site, which to us suggests that this use is too intense for the site and that it should be reduced in size and scale so that it is not overwhelming the site with its traffic and with its trip generation. I'm sure every one of you has had the experience the unfortunate experience of pulling into a grocery store or a drugstore parking lot that's badly designed. I know we have a couple of them in East Hampton that are just always, unpleasant to deal with. And it's your board that has the responsibility to make sure that this site is adequate for this use, even though the use is a conforming use as the law stands right now. But from what we know of the engineering, the trip generation here is much more intense than the site can handle. And my engineer will explain to you why he thinks that trip generation of one car for every machine per hour is the maximum that this building could generate if you have 48 machines, because people tend to put their wash in, hang out for an hour, and leave. And he'll explain to you why he thinks that means that the potential trip generation here is 96 additional trips per hour to the site. And that's a concern, because this site is planned for only 16 parking spaces, and it's on a very difficult stretch of road, albeit one that Mr. Lemansky reminded me has been widened. It's still got a pretty nasty curve, and it's an unpleasant stretch of road to have trucks and cars pulling out and coming into the property on, especially so near to the 7-Eleven. So we think that the applicant has to give you some more information about trip generation and about what the parking standard is on the lot. But to start the ball rolling, we're providing some, and the person that's going to give it to you is here with me. It's Drew Bennett, and he's a professional engineer working with me.
Jeff, I have a question. Was Mr. Bennett here for the last meeting? When I spoke to you after this, you said you had a written submission.
Yeah.
The board wants to close this and did close it because they felt that there was no further information needed or necessary that they required. This having oral testimony here today is not what was comprehended when I saw you on the street. And had he been here, I don't know why you would have left, even if I'd said I didn't think anything was going on.
I told you when I met that I had additional information that when we met, and we met inadvertently, by the way. It wasn't like I went up to Bo and said, "Hey, what's going on? I'm gonna leave if you tell me I can leave." We met inadvertently on the street. I had referenced the engineering information in my original letter, and I'm giving you the original letter, but the source of it is from Drew Bennett.
That was not my understanding, that there was going to be further testimony here. I don't think that's necessarily fair to the applicant. This has been vetted now for 2.5 years.
I don't see why it's unfair to the applicant when he's got a month to respond, and I think the board has a right to hear this evidence. I think it was improper to close the hearing, to be perfectly frank about it, because you've got a secret issue that's still open. It's undecided whether, if this is an unlisted action, you're gonna have to look at and prepare an EAF Part 2. That is all on the public record, which is open to the public and open to comment by me. So I think closing it was not the correct procedure to follow. So I don't see why we're in any different position than we would be on any other night. He's here. I don't have just to reassure you, this is not a lengthy statement. He just happens to be here. His letter, I think, is 3 pages long.
It was my understanding that the submission you requested was in right for a written submission. The board has been through all these issues. The secret issue may be outstanding only to the extent that the board hasn't made a written resolution decreeing it. But I don't believe that they have.
That doesn't mean the secret issue is closed. It doesn't mean it's closed.
They closed the meeting.
I understand that.
Volition, the meeting was closed.
I understand that. And I repeat, I think that is an incorrect action. Because you still have a secret issue open. You can't close the public record when you don't know what the next step you're going to take is. In addition to that, no matter what they do on SECRA, they still have an obligation to go through and take evidence on the site plan standards. And to date, we have never addressed site plan standards. This is the first time anyone is bringing up site plan standards, which include parking and adequacy of circulation.
This has been going on for 2.5 years.
It's been going on for a very long time of that 2.5 years because the applicant did not have his application prepared and complete, and I sat through easily 10 meetings here, many of which were adjourned after I had gotten here because the applicant did not have a complete application. And I asked the board repeatedly to terminate the process because the applicant did not present you a complete application. And I easily attended 10 meetings in front of you where I sat. I don't think there's any hardship to anyone to let my engineer speak to this board for 10 minutes.
We're not here to squelch dissent. I'm happy to listen to your engineer. But we closed the public meeting because when we asked if anybody had anything else to say, nobody said anything.
I understand. And I apologize for that. It probably was not prudent to just leave. I should have gone in, but I think I was pretty tired and it was cold, to be honest with you.
Let's hear the engineer.
Okay. And I'll hand in, I'll wait till he's done and then we'll hand in everything together.
I will say that your questions about trip generation and parking are, to me, in making my notes on this issue, fairly new. I mean, I don't think they've been raised before. So
Yeah,
it's kind
I'm
of
just-
a last minute to the table objection, but
Well, because we were kind of very focused on SECRA and what the correct procedure was. It got complicated. And it was only when the board faced that turn in the road or, the possibility of going either calling it an unlisted action or calling it a type 2 action, that the reality of the site plan standards came into play. Because if you declare it to be an unlisted action, and it was somewhat prompted by a comment from one of the board members that, to the effect of, well, if it's unlisted, it's kind of all over. And I said, no, it's not really over because that's the point at which you would start considering your local standards, which are your site plan standards. So I think it's the appropriate time to do it. And I appreciate being allowed to present this. And I apologize for the confusion because I caused it.
Just for the record, so I don't get in trouble with my client, I didn't allow Mr. Bragman to open this up for all purposes. I said that we would have a submission conference. Next thing I know, there's a letter in saying that I agreed to open it for all purposes. It's not my intent in discussing it. I asked him to call me after I sent him the email. We didn't speak, and then a letter went in, which misrepresented my position. Second of all, the site plan issues that Mr. Bragman is raising today aren't new. That's what we've been going back and forth with Nelson and Pope and amending the application. I think you know that Ms. Eisman has had many conversations with Suffolk County about the entrance and the exit and the parking, and all of those things have been discussed for 2.5 years. What this really is a delay by a competitor, right? Where's Mr. Bennett been for 2.5 years? Where's he been? It's closed now, and now all of a sudden we want to open it, and we have to have it stay open for all of these reasons. Nonsense. This is just a competitor trying to delay our moving forward, and that's really all it is. With respect to the secret issue, you can close this and you make a decision, right? My understanding from the discussions with the board, I think I know where that decision's going, and it's proper. Right? You closed it properly. You don't have to open it. My agreement to reopening it was for a written submission, not for live testimony. That was mine, and I request that you close it.
Well, as long as we're here, I'd like to hear what the man has to say. It's not going to change. It may change a lot. I don't know, but I'd like to hear what he has to say. And you have a chance, Mr. Gilmartin, to answer whatever he says. And it's not open to anything else except this one discussion.
Good evening. My name is Drew Bennett, consulting engineer doing business at 3 Railroad Avenue, East Hampton, New York. It's the first time I've appeared before this board. I'll give you a quick background on 30 years of experience. Licensed professional engineer in the state of New York. I've had my own practice for the last 10 years. I currently serve as the village engineer for the village of East Hampton and the village of Sagaponack. And I was asked to do a review of the site plan as proposed, and I do have written submission, which I'll hand out here, my brief report here. And I will make an effort not to repeat anything that Mr. Bragman said to try to keep this as brief as possible. I think the point that Jeff is trying to make is that poorly planned sites are a problem to the community, And if they're too intense a use or not properly planned, it becomes a burden to neighbors or people passing by and so forth. So I'll start with parking, I'll talk about trip generation, and I'll talk about ingress and egress. The applicant proposes 16 parking spaces. I believe he's referring to a village code.
Excuse me, Joe, could you pass out your report so we can just take a peek at it while you're speaking?
Sure.
Thanks.
Applicant's proposing 16 parking spaces. I believe they're referring to the parking requirement in Village Code, which says 101 space per 180 square feet GFA. Actually, if you look at my interpretation of GFA, gross floor area, they'd actually need 21 spaces, not 16 spaces. It appears they've subtracted some area, back room area, and I think that's important. I think what we're saying here is that it's the type of use or the intensity of the particular use that's being proposed here. 48 washing machines is actually a fairly intense use for a 28,000 square foot lot. There is no lookup criteria in the village code for a coin-operated laundromat, so they used the next closest thing, which came out, in my opinion, to be 21 spaces. If you look to the town of Southampton code, it'd be 1 space per 48 per machine, which would be 48 spaces. If you look at the town of Brookhaven, it's 1 space per 150 square feet. I think it comes out to be about 25 spaces. So clearly, based on those comparisons, there's insufficient parking for 48 machines as currently proposed. Jeff mentioned a factor called trip generation. Really depends on how many people are coming in and out of the parking area, out of the parking lot itself. And if you, there's a design manual put out by transportation engineers where you can look at values for how many trips are typically on average generated by this particular use. Those design manuals actually don't include laundromats. And so we have to sort of back into what we would expect to see on peak hourly rate. And based on industry standards or industry experience, and also looking at the parking requirements, you'll see that down in Southampton says there's 1 car per machine. I think some of the industry standards would say maybe it's 1 car per 2 machines. Either way, it's about 48 to 96 trips per hour at peak use, which would be full capacity, which is a trip, a minute, depending on which, roughly speaking. And what's important about that is if you don't have enough parking, people are waiting for a parking space, and you have people that are trying to get in and out. And second of all, if you don't have any queuing meaning areas to wait in the entrance or in the exit while you wait for a parking space to be available, traffic begins to back up out onto the highway in this case. So my point is that 48 machines is a lot for 28,000 square feet, and 16 parking spaces, in my opinion, is not anywhere near enough for this particular level of use for this particular site. Ingress and egress, I'll point out to Mr. Lemansky, I know Steve professionally. There's 2 diagrams here that are attached, and what they are simulations of a passenger car and I'll say UPS type truck. It's called AutoTurn. It's a computer simulation of how those vehicles are able to move about within the parking space. Long story short, a typical passenger car is just barely able to get out of the exit, be able to make that turn and radius without mounting the curbs. A typical UPS truck or a FedEx truck, you'll see on figure 2 of the handout, you'll see that it has to climb over the triangular area here to be able to get out. So when you take all these factors together, that you've got a pretty tight parking area, small in size, you don't have enough parking spaces, and you got a lot of people coming in and out. Those 3 things combined, in my opinion, are going to cause or potentially cause a problematic site. And I would just ask that the board, be aware of these, and for the applicant to take them into consideration in terms of any improvements, that they need to make on their particular site plan. So That's all I had to say. If you had any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Trucks are never pulled.
Yeah, that's funny, thanks.
Thanks.
Two quick observations. We'll respond to Mr. Bennett's letter, which we just received. One, there's a lot of talk about the town of Southampton. And the town of Southampton had nothing to do with the issue on use. I don't know where that comes from. The zoning board looked at an interpretation of a word, and that's what that case was about. Mr. Bennett seems to get his parking calculations from the town. Parking calculations from this lot were established by the Zoning Board of Appeals in the 77 variance that we got. That established the 15 units. And remember, we are not looking for the expansion now. Under that, we reduced the size. And we'll address, through an engineer, Mr. Bennett's other comments. Thank you.
Bill?
All right, having heard that last insertion into the record, we would now, I don't think, do we close it or we wait for Mr.
Keep it open for all
Gilmartin's?
purposes for Mr.
Until
Gilmartin
Mr.
to reply.
Gilmartin responds. So at the request of the applicant, may we adjourn this until we hear your response?
For a written submission by us.
Yes.
For the limited purpose of a
Yes.
written
Do you
submission.
want to submit testimony? You're
I don't
welcome.
know yet, but the
Why
written
don't you-
or oral testimony.
Why don't you leave it open then?
Okay.
I'll make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn for the purposes of a written and/or oral reply to Mr. Bregman and Mr. Bennett's letters to the May 5th, 2014 meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, last item on our agenda for tonight is Susan Lillywhite, 68 Jokes Lane.
That's already adjourned.
That's
She's
adjourned.
already adjourned.
It's already adjourned.
So just so everybody is aware, we have already voted to change the May work session from May 26th, which would be Memorial Day, to May 27th, which would be Tuesday. And for those really forward thinkers, we've changed the September 1st public hearing from Labor Day to Tuesday, September 2nd. We now can vote to approve previous minutes, if everyone has read them.
I haven't read them. I haven't read either of them.
They're ready whenever you guys are ready to
Okay.
vote on them.
So shall we postpone that?
Yeah, we can do that
Yes.
at the work session.
The next meeting will be a work session on April 28th. And with that, if there is no further business, may I have a motion to conclude the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.